Good afternoon, Dr. Wong and fellow classmates. I was very excited when I read about this project because I knew immediately what book I would want to use for this. Elijah Buxton by Christopher Paul Curtis is one of my all-time favorite novels, and it is also one that my students every year absolutely love to do. This was my 8th year doing it. I still have students who come back to me years after doing it and say, "Are y'all still doing Elijah? What do your students think of it?" It's something that sticks with them forever because of the lessons and the things that we're able to do with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those things as we go through this presentation. Elijah of Buxton was written by Christopher Paul Curtis, and it takes place in Buxton, Canada, which was a haven for freed and escaped slaves. Buxton, Canada was founded by a man named Reverend King, and he basically brought slaves from the United States into Canada and started up a community that had a very diverse and amazing school system. They had a wonderful education program there. Everyone in the community worked together. There was a lot of fellowship and a great sense of community, and still is today. In this book, the protagonist or main character, Elijah, is an 11-year-old boy living in Buxton in the mid-1800s. He is the first child born free in Buxton. Everyone else is either younger than him or were at one point a slave. He's known to be very fragile, and he sometimes lacks common sense. So when something happens to a dear friend of his that he believes is his fault, he has no choice but to seek up, get the courage and seek out the United States, cross the border, and try to find the person who committed the crime against his friend. Once he does that, he finally realizes for the first time ever how horrible it really is across the border, and he runs into some life-threatening situations, some hardships, and some really dark and difficult times. The way the book is written, however, it is completely age appropriate. It really helps students feel that sensitivity about that point in history, but it's yet at the same time it's written with some humor, and so students can enjoy it and laugh, even though in 2 chapters they'll be crying and needing Kleenexes. So there's this perfect balance in this book. It makes it great for 6th graders. There's a cover of it, and as you can see, it has won some awards. It has won the John Newbery Medal. It has also been the recipient of the Coretta Scott King Award and the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction. For this, my focus is on reader response and critical inquiry. This is the way I have been doing it for the past 8 years. My goals for students are for them to be able to express their knowledge and thoughts through writing. Much of what we do is short answer, long answer, or essay incorporated with research. We do a lot of problem solving, and I want them to start making connections between historical events and how life is today. Also, I want them to develop awareness of worlds beyond their own, which is very difficult for 6th graders to do, but yet very important. I also want them to see beyond the literal and find deeper meanings in written works. We incorporate other texts, blogs, and mixed media along with this novel to help them do that. In the end, I hope that they develop curiosity and they seek to investigate. I want them to go out and want to read more, learn more, and absorb more information about this historical time period and about the African American culture here in the United States as well. One of the first projects that we do is the Elijah character study. The point of this activity is to get students to really think about the character of Elijah and make inferences about Elijah's character based on his actions and his interactions with others in the book. This is actually a very challenging activity for 6th graders because they have to go beyond the literal and they have to see something in the character Elijah that isn't immediately obvious. Also want them to start tracking and thinking about changes in Elijah from chapter to chapter. We also start to incorporate Frederick Douglass and his autobiography. This is definitely not sixth grade or typical sixth grade reading material. However, by working together, having frequent discussions and really getting into the vocabulary, I do find that my advanced sixth graders can handle 3 or 4 chapters from Frederick Douglass's autobiography. Frederick Douglass talks a great deal about what he witnessed as a slave. He goes into great detail about sounds and sights and smells and experiences. And he has entire chapters devoted to how he was able to basically trick and fool his way into learning how to read and write. And these ways are amazing and clever, which astounds the students because they themselves would probably never think of doing some of these things. Frederick Douglass also goes into great detail about how education is the true key to freedom, and through education, we can expand and grow and accomplish things that we did not think were possible. Those are very deep and strong connections that I want my students to grasp. As far as using the internet and finding sources beyond text, we visit the Buxton Museum website. Buxton, because it is a real place, has a lot of different things that are mentioned in the novel, which is completely historical fiction. For example, there is a great deal of information about the Buxton School, and so we're able to take a Buxton School tour, which is very interesting to the students. They can't imagine being separated, girls on one side of the room and boys on the other, and having separate entrances. They get to see like the primers and the pre-primers. As they do the tour, they get to see how the room would have been heated and the candles and things like that. It's very interesting for them. The Liberty Bell is also an important and symbolic part of Elijah Buxton. They get to watch some videos about the Liberty Bell. They can also see maps and read some historical documents, which gets them thinking about other types of texts and materials that can help them learn. This is the Buxton website. It is pretty simple, but there's some great information. So there's local information, but under events, there are different events going on. They can read about those, even though we can't go and visit it. Under history, we have some virtual exhibits. The collection preview doesn't have a lot of information at this point in time, but under the exhibits, there's the Elgin Settlement, which is mentioned many, many times in the book. Buxton was also sometimes called the Elgin Settlement. It talks a little bit about Reverend William King, the founder. And so this is a great source of information for students if they go to write about Reverend King, which they do toward the end of the novel. There's some ebooks, and then we have a series of videos. This one was an interesting one for students because the First Baptist Church is mentioned many times in the novel. And even though this isn't the original one, they like to think that it is and think about how its structure and what it would have been like to actually go to church there. There's also a video about the Liberty Bell, so they actually get to see the bell and hear a little bit of the history about the bell as well, which is very important. I like to be able to incorporate history as much as possible in everything we do. I absolutely love the Underground Railroad activities that we do. The Underground Railroad isn't mentioned a lot in the book, but we do know that most of the people that live in the settlement or Buxton were escaped and freed slaves. And so I like for students to really think about that journey. And that's also something that's very important for the character Elijah as well. When his parents talk about these things, he doesn't really grasp the gravity of the situation and the fear that they had in leaving the plantation and having to put trust in people that they were just really unsure of. And that's really what this is all about. This is a fantastic website. This is the Scholastic website, but specifically the activities here are very, very interesting. So what this does is it has a narrative that students can follow along with. And along with that, there's the text or the narration. They can actually listen to it, which is wonderful. And then there is a variety of information. There's some other links It's got some thinking stuff. We do a lot of things with this. This kind of drives discussion during these activities. They can listen to other narration. If they click these, they will see excerpts from other books and other sources, like this one right here, Born in Slavery, Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Project. That one's very interesting. And some students want to find more information and read some of these books in which there are excerpts as well, which is very exciting to me as a reading teacher. There's a quote. There's another book. That's one that they've been interested in before. Eventually, at the end of all of this, there is a tell the story activity, and we use this to start thinking about actually expansion of a story. This kind of gets them thinking, but in the end, it's not the full story. There's also other information here which they really like. So this really takes us on a journey online as well. We also try doing web quests from time to time, depending on the time we have. This year we have Chromebooks as part of a digital project, so I imagine we will get to do a web quest. This one right here is rather simple. We form teams, and everyone on the team has some type of a designated role. Within that team, we have readers, encouragers, summarizers, and communicators as well, which is very important. The navigator, for example, will explore, I have them explore maps of the Underground Railroad and different paths that can be taken to Buxton specifically. And anyway, they do their research. They can read about other famous conductors of the Underground Railroad. They have to create a PowerPoint presentation, although this year's not PowerPoint. It is going to be done through Google, which is slides. Have not had them do a video before, although I'm contemplating doing that this year. And this was not made by me. This was made by another teacher as well. If we hop to conclusion, there's the conclusion. There's rubrics. This is actually a fairly simple one, so I do encourage my advanced students to come up with additional activities that they would like to be able to do. And they love that. They like to have that control over their learning. Some final thoughts. This year I have done less paper tasks with this. We still do a lot of discussion. We do a lot of, videos and research and reading other pieces of literature. But, and I don't know if this link was not working earlier because my students had already finished the assignment, so I'm going to open it up this way. What this is a Google form, since we do have the Chromebooks this year. And what I try to do is to create questions that really stimulate student thinking and give them a chance to really analyze the text and analyze character actions and also author choices as well. Like this one, we can incorporate knowledge of figurative language and literary devices while dealing with by dealing with a subject that is a bit more sensitive, and that's the use of derogatory terms. There's mood and some tone stuff as well. Differences in point of view. I really try to get students just to think beyond the literal. Here's some other books that I recommend to students. Some of them are a little more complex than others. This one's a newer book that's available through Amazon, and I think it's about $6. This one's poetry, so I do like to incorporate some poetry as well. And then over here we have a series of other books. Walter Dean Myers is a fantastic author. There's Henry's Freedom Box, which is a little bit simpler, but a lot of students enjoy that one as well. Nightjawn is also one that several of my students like to read. And some of my students that really like a major challenge will try to read Roots by Alex Haley, which is quite the undertaking, but one that is definitely, well worth the time and effort. So this just gives you an overview of some of the activities and things. There's so much more that you could do. I have so much with this book. And if you're ever interested in more information or activities, just let me know. I'd be glad to share them. Thank you.